Project. And just a reminder, a recap, the reason we're going over this is because we're trying to recognize that we are projects and that we're not perfect. Now, I know that nobody here would say that they're perfect. Now, that'd be completely ridiculous. And we'd all say, oh, we have flaws and, we struggle with this or that, but we don't really act like it sometimes. And that's the whole point. We are all projects. That's why we call it the People Project. The church, most of all, is a people project. And so right now we're going to talk about people. And this is going to be fun because we're going to talk about how to interact with one another, how to keep conversations going, make people feel more welcome, and try and do things like Jesus did. He was a people person. Now, I don't know the personality that Jesus had exactly. I don't know how he was in his personality type or anything like that, but I do know that he was great with people. Now, I know for a fact, I'm not the only one that has had some very awkward conversations, perhaps even in this very building with some of you, and some of you are probably like, yeah, every conversation we have with you is extremely awkward. But I know I'm not the only one. And so, in order to, kind of come clean here, I'll tell you something about a conversation that I had with a member I will not mention by name, and just to show you how not perfect I am. I was in the office, and you might be wondering where my awesome mustache went. Well, this is the story behind that. I was in the office, I was sitting down, and I was writing an article for a blog, and I decided to put some dye in my mustache to make it a little bit more darker, so add some more depth to it. So I stuck it in, and I started getting sucked into this blog article, and I was on a roll with it, and all of a sudden, it started to burn, this dye. Now, it looked like caramel. I mean, it was like just brown goop all the way down my face, and it started to burn, and so I stood up to go out and wash it out, and this member walked into the office and struck up a conversation with me with this brown goop all the way down my face. If that wasn't uncomfortable enough, he did not even mention it. We had this conversation, and I could see his eyes darting down, looking at my lip, but not saying it, acting like it wasn't even there, and then we just kept talking until finally it was so uncomfortable I had to say it and be like, okay, you're probably wondering what all this is here. And it was a very awkward and uncomfortable conversation. And that happens a lot. I mean, not that. Hopefully that doesn't happen a lot. But uncomfortable conversations happen a lot, everywhere. From the waitress, when they says, enjoy your meal, and you go, thanks, you too. And it's like, wait, sorry. Ugh. Or when you're in the parking lot and someone says, all right, take care, see you later. And you're like, all right, see ya. And then both of you start walking to your cars together in silence because you don't know what to say because it's ended. The church is full of very imperfect people. We're all imperfect. And we have these awkward conversations sometimes, maybe because we're just not exactly comfortable with one another. I have awkward conversations with my younger brother, who I'm very close with, as many of you know. We have a lot of very awkward conversations, but it's different. It's awkward because we are trying so hard to make each other very uncomfortable. It's a different kind of awkward because we're close and we have that kind of bond and relationship. That's what the church needs. A lot of churches really struggle with this aspect of making visitors or people feel welcome because it is very shallow. And we don't want to really dive into each other's lives and have these very deep and meaningful conversations because that's too personal. That we don't want to get that close with these people, or maybe we just don't feel close to these people because they don't really feel like family, or because we just see them on Sunday, or we just see them on Wednesday. So there's not really this opportunity to grow together. Right now we're going to talk about part 3 is kingdom building. That is, how do we build up God's church from the inside and out? And we're going to do that by talking about visitors. Now this is mainly going to be about visitors and how to make people feel more welcome. But it also applies to maybe some people that have been coming here for a while that still don't feel plugged in and still don't feel like they're really a part of the family here. So kingdom building. It all begins within, with us, and how we function. Some people call it church atmosphere. It's the chemistry of the church building. Now think about when you've gone on trips before and you go and visit a congregation and your experience with that congregation. What was it like for you? You might have visited a congregation and then gone away saying, that was such a great and loving family. Or maybe you've gone to another congregation, like I've been to before, where I walked in, I sat down, and not one person came up and said anything. Now, I could have gone up and talked to other people, but no one came and said anything. And there are so many reasons that go into this, and we don't want this to be an hour-long lesson, so we'll try not to dive into it too much. But some churches are just so comfortable with the people that they have. If you remember in the first lesson, we talked about this congregation. I was speaking with the men there, and I was actually looking to work with this congregation, and they said, we're looking to grow to be about 150 members, and that's really what we're shooting for. And after that, we don't want any more people. And they set this number, but some people, they're just comfortable with who they have in the building. Some congregations are just, I know everyone here, their family, their friends, and so any visitor that comes in, it's almost like they're an intruder. And it's like this person to be avoided, or maybe they're just uncomfortable going up and talking to that person, and so they just kind of leave them alone because that's not the person I usually talk to every Sunday and every Wednesday. And we can talk about how some churches, maybe members struggle with walking up and talking to someone who they just know right off the bat they're not going to get along with. They look completely different. They are from a different walk of life. You can tell they have different maybe hobbies or a job than you do, and so you just kind of avoid them because you're like, someone else can take that one because we're not going to get along very well. So it all begins with visitors. All right, so when's a good time to introduce Jesus to a visitor? We talked about how, when last Sunday, when you walk up to someone, basically picture in your mind, Jesus is coming with me. You're basically trying to introduce that person to Jesus, somehow or other. Now, you don't want to walk up there and say, hi, I'm Dale, and this is Jesus. And have no one there, people are going to be like, right, well, thanks for having me, and then they'll just leave and they'll never come back, guaranteed. But how can we introduce to someone Jesus? When's a good time to do that? There are two extremes here. There are the kind of people who have a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of passion, and so they will go and knock doors and talk to people and basically just try and shove it down their throat and say, do you know Jesus? Have you been baptized? You know what happens if you haven't been baptized? You know what happens if you have sin in your life? You know what happens? Don't you want to go to heaven? What's wrong with you? And then the people are kind of backing away like, okay, man, I don't even know your name. I don't know anything about you. You don't know me. There's that kind of person. And then there's the other person who they develop a friendship and they begin to hang out with this person and they develop this relationship with them to the point that they don't want to introduce to them Jesus because it might ruin the relationship. That's very common, extremely common in the church. So when's a good time to introduce Jesus to a visitor? And how do you do it? All right, after offering personal assistance. So this is, you're talking to someone that comes through the back door, and maybe you are discovering their life story, some of the things that they're struggling with, and maybe it's a mom, and she has like 4 kids. And so she begins talking about how she barely made it here because she has all these kids, and they're just driving her crazy, as kids apparently do. And so you see an opportunity right there. I probably couldn't get away with this being a male, but if you just said, what if we went and got some dinner, and then my daughter or whoever can watch your kids? After offering personal assistance, that gives them a break. That's recognizing their need, offering your assistance, and then it helps you develop that relationship, and it sets up another appointment for you to meet with that person. So, when's a good time to introduce Jesus to a visitor? After offering personal assistance. Number 2, after you've planned a second meeting. So we talked about in the first one, mentioned it in the second part as well, foyers are not a great place to develop friendships or really relationships. It's where you're going to have those initial conversations, but it's not really going to be where you're going to set up a Bible study. That's not going to happen in the foyer most of the time. You have to get them out of the building to get them into the church. So after you've planned a second meeting, maybe that's when another opportunity will arise. The reason behind that, beyond just the auditorium, the foyer, not a great place to mingle and socialize on a deeper level, but other reasons are because that person doesn't know you, you don't know that person yet, and it helps you get to talk, and they feel like you've listened to them, and they've listened to you, and you develop this relationship maybe over dinner, over coffee, something like that. Okay, number 3, throw all of them out the window if you've been planning those two, but then an opportunity arises. Sometimes that happens. And you'll be talking to someone, and they'll just flat out say, I've honestly just been wanting to know more about the Bible. Can you teach me? Now, at that point, throw those first two out the window. Don't go, great. Man, I was like, I'm not ready for this. We were going to have coffee. I was going to babysit their kids first before we got into this Bible study stuff. No, if they straight up ask you or just throw that opportunity your way, take it. So throw those two out the window if an opportunity arises. All right, looks a little funky, but I wanted to point out something. If you've read through the New Testament and you've looked at the life of Jesus, one of the things that you will notice as you read through the New Testament and all of these accounts is when Jesus approaches people or when people approach him, the text will oftentimes say something like, then Jesus saw them and had compassion on them. Or then Jesus noticed, and then fill in the blank, and the events will happen. And I have a few verses at the top of the screen there. If you're a Bible marker or if you want to write them down, I would encourage you to go through and look at this. It was a very encouraging study for me, but the verses are at the top of the screen here. But this is the one that struck me the most. It's Luke chapter 7 and verse 13. It says, when the Lord saw her, his heart went out to her, and he said, don't cry. We've talked about this, I believe it was in the first lesson, that we have to love people. We can't see people as obstacles. We can't see people as just an irritation or an inconvenience. We have to love people. When the Lord saw her, his heart went out to her. This is the account where this woman's son had just died. And so Jesus takes notice of this woman who is grieving and who is weeping, and he goes up to comfort her, don't cry, to be there for her, and then does something about it. Now, obviously, we don't have the power to raise people from the dead like Jesus did. But there are times when people come in, and whether their eyes are actually wet or not, they are grieving, they are hurting, and they are going through something terrible that we may not even know about. Notice people, love people. Now, the only way to do that is to get into people's lives. Jesus knew hearts, Jesus knew people better than anybody, but when you walk down the street, or when you drive down the street, or yesterday, I was walking into the hospital to see Janelle, and there was this lady inside of her car outside the door with her head in her hands. And I thought, that's strange. I don't really want to interrupt right now, but I thought she was coming inside, but on the way out the door, she had her head up, out of her hands, no longer crying, and she smiled and waved at me. And so I waved back at her, and I smiled. And then I got on the bike, and I started to pull out of the garage, and I thought, I wonder how many people are like that. They're breaking down, they're crying, they're going through some terrible thing in their life, but when they notice that someone sees them, they just smile and they wave. How many people are like that? I know from experience that I'm talking to people, and you say, how are you doing in a church auditorium or foyer, and they say, good, how are you? And I already know what that person's going through in their life. But it's just this trigger response. I'm good. How are you doing? Sometimes the answer to that is, I'm not doing too good. I'm not doing all right. But if we don't develop the kind of relationships that allow us to become closer to one another, the answer every Sunday and every Wednesday and every time we get together will always be, good, how are you? Whether or not they're good. So Jesus saw people, his heart went out to them, he loved them, he noticed them, and then he did something about it. What can we do? Can't raise people from the dead. But when we notice that there are people that are hurting or going through a hard time, the answer to that is not, be warmed and filled, go on your way. Or, God bless, or I'm praying for you. Those things are great. To say, I'm praying for you, and to say, I'll be thinking about you. But why not take the initiative on something and say, what can I do for you? How can I be there for you? Or maybe just being with them and checking up on them. We have to go further than just be warmed and filled. I'm praying for you. Jesus noticed people, his heart went out to him, and then he did something about it. Okay, so in order to see others like Jesus, we must understand the difference between an animal and a human. That is just the way that we see people out in the world. They are humans. And we've talked a little bit about how humans were created special. That, we are the only creatures that God made where he breathed into us the breath of life. We're the only creatures that God made that we are actually created in his image with a soul that's going somewhere. We have to understand that people are more than just animals. And I love my dog, don't get me wrong, and sometimes I treat him like he is an actual person, to the point that he has his own office, and to the point that he eats usually whatever I eat. But Bro, as much as I love that dog, is not a human. He's a dog. People are special. People are created differently. We have to understand that visitors that walk in the door, no matter how different they look, no matter if we think that, okay, this person's just going to ask for money, this person is just going to fill in the blank. No matter what we think about that person, it doesn't change the fact that they are still people and not animals. They still have souls. They're still going somewhere. What can we do about it? In order to see others like Jesus, we have to see them as they are. Children of God with souls created in his image. Okay, number 2. Give them hope. Matthew 28:16 through 20. Now, we can go through these a little bit. I'd rather you just write these things down so you can go back and look through some of these scriptures, because we do have some things to get through this morning, because I don't want to preach for hours. And because this is a book, I've been doing quite a bit of research and reading on this. And so I noticed after preaching through this lesson the first time, and it was an hour and 15 minutes, I was like, that ain't going to fly. So Matthew 28:16 through 20, we'll just briefly look at this. All right. In verse 16, it says, Simon Peter replied, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. I tell you, Peter, on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." That's a great section of Scripture, but it was one I had for later. It says Matthew 28. My bad, sorry. Matthew chapter 28. I was reading, and I was like, this is a great passage. I probably had this at some other point in the lesson, but it's not the one we wanted to look at. Matthew chapter 28. This should hopefully make a little bit more sense to us. Yeah, here we go. Now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them. And when they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. So some of them worshiped Jesus, but some doubted. But notice the response that Jesus has. He doesn't directly attack the ones that doubt and go, "How in the world do you guys not believe who I am right now? After all of the miracles, after all of the teaching, after proving myself time and time again that I'm the Son of God, how is it that you doubt me?" No, he doesn't. He just gets on with the mission of the church. "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit." 20, teaching them to observe all that I've commanded you, and behold, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. Hope. What Jesus is saying, as he is recognizing that there are those, because this is inspired, he knows that there are those listening to his message that do doubt him. Jesus gets on with the message, and when he says, "Teach them to observe all that I've commanded to you," I wonder if he was talking to those that doubted. To those that were worshiping and believing in him, I wonder if that was a message to them. There are some people next to you in this crowd that still don't believe. There are still those that are doubting. So when I say go into all the world and make disciples, maybe that starts with the person right next to you who doesn't believe that I'm the Son of God still. And he says, "Behold, I am with you always, even to the end of the age." So to the ones that believe, I wonder if they thought, well, this will be uncomfortable. That's my cousin who is doubting. That's my friend who's doubting. I don't want to change that relationship with that person. I don't want to talk to that person and ruin what we have. We've got great chemistry here. We have a lot of history here. So Jesus closes it out by saying, "I'll be with you, even to the end of the age." We want to see others like Jesus. Give people hope. Give people hope. When we talk about evangelism, let's talk about why it's so important. Let's talk about the power behind it. And that is every door you knock, every person you talk to, Jesus is still with you. That promise still holds true. Next, be convinced of the power of truth. And this is John 8:31-32. be convicted of the power in the truth. You know, we talk so much about how there are these different Bible study methods that you need to go through because you need to have some organization and you need to be able to work with someone and answer every single question that they might possibly ask you in a Bible study. But sometimes we just need to stop thinking about that stuff so much and making it more complicated and just sit down. Because what I've noticed is that the more you think about which Bible study technique I'm going to use, what things I'm going to read up on just to make sure that I can answer every question that he or she has, the more time we start thinking about that stuff, the less time we spend actually asking someone into a Bible study, the less time we actually spend acting on these things, and we just kind of work ourselves up into an anxiety because if you're like me, maybe you'll just sit down and go, what if they ask this? What if they ask that? What if they ask this? What if they ask about this Greek word? What if they want me to teach them Aramaic? What if? And I just started thinking about all these different things. I'm like, what if? Maybe I should just sit down and talk with them and find out what's going on in your life? What's your background like? What are you struggling with? And whatever they're struggling with, start there. Here's how Jesus can help you right now. Because if you sit down and talk with someone in a Bible study who is struggling a lot financially, that's what's going to be on their mind. Teach them how Jesus can change their life. Whether that be drug abuse, whether that be a failing marriage, name it. Whatever it is, start there. Show them how Jesus can transform their life as well. There's power in the truth. We need to be convicted of it. All right, let the Lord lead. This is Matthew 4:19 through 20. Matthew 4:19 through 20 is when Jesus is going around and he's gathering up his initial disciples, and he just says, "Follow me, and I'll make you fishers of men." And immediately the disciples got up and followed him. It always struck me so funny as I'm reading through there and like trying to picture this today in the 21st century. Someone walks by you and says, "I'll make you fishers of men. Follow me." And you're sitting down at your desk or in your car at a red light, and you're like, "I'm good. I don't know what that is, but I really don't want any part of that," and you're strange. But something about Jesus, he said, "Follow me, I'll make you fishers of men," and his disciples got up and followed him. Now, I don't think that the disciples truly understood what Jesus was saying. They didn't really understand all that went into that and what they were going to have to go through. Remember, a lot of their mindset at the time was still thinking that the Messiah, who was Jesus, was going to be this guy that was going to come in and knock out the entire Roman Empire. He was going to be a king. He was going to be better than David. He was going to lead them to freedom. That's what they had in mind. Not some guy that's going to walk by and say, "I'm going to teach you how to fish for men," and then keep on going. But it says they immediately got up and followed him. We don't have to understand every single thing about the Bible. We don't have to understand every single book of the Bible and every verse and know exactly where to find what within a Bible study. We just have to follow Jesus. Now, personal Bible study is important, but what I'm saying is we don't have to have every verse that we're going to use memorized. We don't have to have the answer to every single question. We just have to follow Jesus. He has to be in the lead. Jesus has to be the one leading the Bible study. Because it's all right to say, "I don't know." Now, for a minister, sometimes that's hard to say. When someone asks you a question and immediately you're like, what? And I've never thought about that before. Sometimes for ministers it's hard to say, "I don't know," because this is our profession. But even within a Bible study, if someone asks, "What is this?" and you don't know, tell them. And then say, "I'll get back to you on it." And there you go. There's another door that leads to another one because you can say, "I don't know, but I'll get back to you later. How about Tuesday?" And you have Bible study number 2, whether they like it or not. Okay. And last year, be motivated by our purpose. And that's 2 Timothy 2:2. Teach others. Teach other people to teach other people. That's really what the church is all about. It's the spreading of the gospel. Jesus said, "Go into all the world." How are you going to do that? I'm going to teach someone. They're going to teach someone else. They're going to teach someone else. There are so many programs out there where you can actually have a Bible study with someone over a computer, your laptop, your phone, whatever. And they're really great. Got to see other people the way that Jesus does. All right, so here's some practical pointers here. Let's make it happen. How do we do it? Don't forget their name. I can't be the only one. Someone will tell me their name, and immediately after they say it, it's just gone. My brain's like, don't need that, kick it out, don't know it. I'm so thankful for terms like brother and sister within the church because that has saved me so many times. We just go, brother, sister. Not to any of you, of course. But don't forget their name. It's really important. However you do that, whether it's writing it down immediately after they tell you or just having some kind of word association trick in your mind, which I have with a few of you and won't tell you what they are, but they help you remember people's names. Don't forget their name because it goes a long way. There's a guy at the gas station down here. His name's John. He works at, I keep wanting to call it, it's not Special K. That's a cereal. Circle K. Gas station down here. His name's John. Really nice guy. And granted, he was a little weirded out, but I'd gone there. I saw his name tag, and the next time I walked in, I was like, John, how's it going? He's like, who are you? Like, am I supposed to know you? But after a while, I just kept calling him by his name every time I saw the name tag, and it helped it stick for me. And it's like that with a couple other people. And for some people, sure, it might weird them out. But for others, it might be like, man, he actually remembered my name. Don't forget their name. Number 2, it's okay to feel uncomfortable. You got to get used to that. Unless you are just a complete social butterfly, have no problem in any social situations, it's okay to feel uncomfortable. In fact, it's okay to tell people that you feel uncomfortable. Maybe not the person you're talking to, but just saying, like, I'm kind of uncomfortable in like a large crowd of people. Because I love polishing the pulpit. It is this ginormous convention. It's about 4,000, 5,000 people all gathered together in one room. I love people, and I love the church. I'm very uncomfortable in a crowd that size, walking through. There's just way too many people there. There's way too many conversations going on, and it kind of stresses me out a little bit. But I love it. It's okay to feel uncomfortable. If you see someone that you're like, I don't know this person, but I'm about to go up and introduce myself to them, and you feel this sense of like dread or this is going to be so incredibly awkward, don't worry. It'll make a great story later. But it's okay to feel uncomfortable when you're talking to people. Okay. It gets easier with can't see it from back there. I thought I said alphabetic. Atmospheric change. Okay, what I mean by this, it gets easier with an atmospheric change is when more people are doing it within the church, it becomes easier. When the atmosphere changes within the church, that is when you are no longer doing it by yourself. You're no longer the person that everyone kind of just looks at like, hey, there's a visitor, you should go talk to him. When the entire church atmosphere is, we're a bunch of imperfect people, we're trying our best, we are sinners in need of a Savior. When you change the atmosphere to, we are real people. There are so many young people that leave the church today because why? The church is full of hypocrites. They say one thing, they dress one way, they do something at church, but the moment they leave the doors, they are someone entirely different. And a lot of younger people that will notice that. And it's not just the younger generation, but there's a lot of people who notice, okay, I saw that person praying and singing all the songs I was, but I also saw that person fill in the blank. It gets easier with an atmospheric change. When everyone is actually doing what they're supposed to, trying to welcome visitors, talk to people, it gets a lot better. Okay, encourage those that do. Now, this might be a no-duh statement, but when you see someone, maybe it is that person that always goes up and makes it a point to talk to a visitor, encourage that person. Because oftentimes it might feel like to that person that they are the only ones doing it, and it can become discouraging because it's a lot of work. Encourage those that make an effort to reach out and talk to other people. All right, be transparent and real. This kind of goes into the other categories as well. But don't come across as you are Mr. or Mrs. Perfect who has your life all together. Come across as real. Just be yourself. And I know that's something that it's probably cliche, or maybe you've just heard too much, but just be yourself. Just walk up. If you're awkward, be awkward. If you're kind of weird, be weird. If you're quirky, be quirky. If you're cool and macho, just be yourself. Be yourself around people, and it will go a long way. You won't stress yourself out for future Bible studies or when that friendship actually strikes up, and then you go fishing together, and they're like, you are not the person I met in the church for you. You are redneck, or something like that. Just be yourself. All right. Again, that's messed up, but how good and how pleasant it is when God's people live together in unity. One of my favorite Psalms. How good and how pleasant when God's people live together in unity. It's amazing. When the church is functioning the way that it should, Ephesians chapter 4, When the church is being who the church is supposed to be, it's good, it's pleasant, it's enjoyable, it's family. So finding your ministry, I guess this terminology might be a little bit strange, but your ministry, this is your talent. What can you do to serve the church? Now, only you can answer that question, but how can God use you to serve him? And you can fill in that blank. What's your talent? What's your gift? What's your skill set? Everyone has one. In fact, Wes was making fun of me for this, but I took every letter in the alphabet and I put a word to it, basically, that is a talent or characteristic. Again, that looks all messed up, but you can kind of get the point up there. You have every letter has something attached to it. You may not know exactly what it is that you can contribute, but I know because you are created in the image of God, because you are human, because you are unique, you have something to bring to the table. You have a part within the church. Now, maybe sometimes we feel like we need an invitation, or we need to be asked, or maybe we're just assigned a job or something within the congregation that's really not our talent or skill. And it's just kind of been given to us. And so we just take it because that's what we're handed. But each of us have a talent and a skill. Find out what that is, and consider this the offer, the invitation to step up and do it. If you're good with kids, you can teach Bible class. If you are a social butterfly, you can be a greeter at the door. You name it. If you're good with tech, you're upstairs, like Lyndall. But it has to start with loving people. And by saying loving people, I hope it doesn't sound like a cheesy girl post on Pinterest or something, but you have to love yourself. And in order to love yourself, that means you care about your own soul and your own eternal state. How is your soul? How is your spiritual life right now? How much do you love yourself? Because if you do love yourself and you care about where you're going, you care about other people, then you'll care about your soul. It's the most important thing you have. You think of your most treasured possession that you have in this world. It does not compare to your soul. You have a soul, and it's going somewhere. How is it this morning? If you are in need of putting on Christ in baptism, there is no better time than this morning. We are a family here. We are a bunch of very imperfect people, and if you had to publicly respond for some reason, there is not going to be any judgment coming from this crowd of people. I know a lot of you. I think I know almost everybody here. There's not going to be any judgment. There's going to be care. There's going to be prayers. There's going to be some social distancing type hugs. But if you'd like to put on Christ in baptism, or if there's something in your life that you're struggling with, why not make that known to this congregation this morning? If you need anything at all, come now as we stand and as we sing.